Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
Brandon, we have the second part of the Grand Slam collection with Dr. Mo Pickens tonight. And I tell you, it's a really exciting time. We've had a lot of positive feedback on the first episode with Dr. Mo, which was the week leading into the Masters, talked about preview and prep. And then show 2 tonight will be the off course, basically just taking care of all the off course stuff as we lead into the PGA Championship, which will be next week at Ocean Course. And then, of course, show 3 will be the U.S. Open and Torrey Pines, and that will be actually show 3 and 4 both going to be about on-course stuff. Yeah. For those of you who didn't catch the first episode, Dr. Morris Pickens is a sports psychologist who works with a lot of. He's actually considered by Golf Digest, was considered one of the top 10 golf psychologists that are out there. Works with a lot of good clients. I mean, Zach Johnson, Lucas Glover, Stewart Cink. Mm-hmm. I mean, the list goes on, as well as he's written some books, The Winning Way in Golf and Life, and Learn to Win a Major, and then Learn to Win One Shot at a Time. So, and then you can also find Dr. Mo at Elevate Performance. It's a website, it's a company that he does customized coaching, and he does executive development retreats. And I'm telling you, he's one of those guys that we were just saying before we came on the air that you could just have a glass of lemonade and just sit there on a deck somewhere overlooking a course at the clubhouse and just talk to him all day long.
All day. Yeah.
Fully entertained.
All day long. And if you didn't listen to part 1, I would highly recommend. I mean, that is one of the great parts of the podcast platform is you can go back and kind of hear. I would highly recommend, listening to that. I think it's interesting going into the Open at Kiowa, extremely difficult course. The mental grind, I think, is going to be certainly and Mo will get into it a little bit. It's definitely a different look and feel than the Masters. You're going to have to commit to some shots that you probably mentally don't want to because of the wind. What he's bringing to these tour professionals is really going to be put to the test this upcoming week.
Absolutely. So this is show number 2, Dr. Mo Pickens of the Grand Slam collection, and this is going to be the PGA Championship edition, and he will talk about off the course. Well, Brandon, we are so happy to have back Dr. Mo. Dr. Morris Pickens is back joining us again. We got so much great feedback from the first time Dr. Mo was on the show with us that we can't wait to do this again. This is all part of that Grand Slam collection we've talked about, where Dr. Mo is going to join us for 4 different shows. The first one, if you remember, was the week leading into the Masters, where he really talked a lot about, practice and preparation and what those golfers are going through, not just from the mental aspect of it, but some of the feedback I got was a lot of people were like, wow, I was really looking at all the mental side of things. But then when he started talking about shot allocation and it was unbelievable.
And the math, right? The prioritization of, hey, here is golf broken down. I had probably 10 people go, I've never thought about golf the way that Dr. Mo broke it down and said, hey, here are the things that really affect your score if you break it down the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Dr. Mo, we're so glad to have you back on, and we should stop talking about you as you're sitting here and just start talking to you.
That happens. It happens a lot. I'm used to
it.
Yeah. Well, like we were saying there, it was a really good show. And tonight we're actually going to go in the week leading up to the PGA Championship, of course, which is the 20th through 23rd at the Ocean Course out there in Kiowa Island. It's all going to be about off the course stuff. So for you listeners, we're going to really talk about leading into the tournaments and some of the off the course things. And you're going to hear Dr. Mo break down the 4 major components of that off the course preparation. Before we do that, though, I think we'd be a little bit remiss if we didn't go back and at least visit some of the things we talked about. So a couple of the big things we talked about last time around practice and preparation was, and I wrote this note to myself, was preparation is that acquiring knowledge and usually done with others. And then the practice part of it being that application of that knowledge. And a note that I underlined even was preparation is not practice, like in that distinction there.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people just confuse the two because they think that, whether it's anytime they're on the range or on the putting green, and they could be warming up, they just assume that they're practicing, but, if you just, if you go into work and you're not really doing anything and you're just wasting time, we can waste time in golf as well. Right. But sure, it's easier. Like if you had a speaker come in where you work, okay, that would be preparation. Right. And if you actually took what they talked about and you applied it to your job, that'd be practice. So, it's really in any kind of aspect of life, just understanding and not confusing acquiring knowledge from, practicing or, applying that on your own. And so, I have a lot of guys and a lot of times what happens even as another aspect of that, which really gets into golf, is people are assessing, but they think that they're practicing. So you're out there trying 2 or 3 putters or trying 2 or 3 drivers. You're really assessing or evaluating which one do I think is going to work and that sort of thing. But that's not practice either.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, that's really important to remember those things for sure, because it's that, and like we've talked about, I think we might have even talked about this on the last show, is that K plus, A equals everything, is knowledge plus action equals everything, and knowledge minus action equals nothing. Is right. The knowledge itself isn't going to, so you need that knowledge acquisition, but then you also need the application of it. And that's where I think also, in addition to what you're saying, people make that mistake of, okay, I've got all this knowledge and now what? They forget that you actually have to go and apply it. That's the only way it's going to work for you.
And where I see that happen, even at the highest level, like pretty much every tour player would tell you, okay, I know I need to have a go-to shot off the tee. I know I need to have a shot that, no matter how poor I'm swinging or no matter how nervous I am, and those guys still get nervous, I need to have a shot that I can get in play 95% of the time. Might be my 3-wood, might be a bunt driver, a stinger iron, whatever. But, I'll ask clients, especially new clients, I'll say, hey, what's your stock shot? And they say, a high draw. How about your go-to? This is what I do in terms of a fairway finder. And I say, well, how many times you practice that a month? Well, and I don't practice it that much. Well, if you don't practice it, then you don't have it.
Right.
Well, how is that your go-to?
That's right.
How can you have a go-to that you never practice?
Right.
That's a wish to.
That's right.
I hope this goes in the fairway. That's not really going to work.
Hey, I got a bag full of that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that goes on, and it will be, I know we hadn't gotten into this yet, but it will be really curious, because guys that don't have some sort of go-to, especially something they can keep out of the wind, are going to get exposed at Kiowa.
Absolutely.
And the wind's going to be blowing sideways, and it's a hard visual golf course to get comfortable where you're going to hit it. And if you come in there with one shot off the tee, which most people won't do, but if you come in there with one shot off the tee, it's not going to go good.
So Dr. Mo, was there a time, or is there a time, if you're kind of walking, and we talked about it going into the Masters, where you kind of see one of your clients that they keep going to their go-to. Is that kind of the key to you to go, okay, we probably need to have a discussion after this round, or just kind of see what kind of headspace that he may be in if he keeps going to his go-to shot that he's just trying to find the fairway?
Well, it would depend. I mean, if he's going to it because he's just not comfortable, right? Yeah. Then we would need to have some discussion. If he's going to it because he can't commit to his stock driver and he's worried about it getting up in the wind and that sort of thing. And I mean, this is even a longer discussion and maybe more for when we get into the on course. But like I tell my players all the time, you know, there are times when you're going to be uncomfortable, and there are times when you're not going to be confident. Your job is not to be comfortable or confident. Your job is to be committed. And the difference is, confident means I know where this ball is going to go. And sometimes you just can't be 100% confident where the ball is going to go. And committed is, this is what I'm trying to do. I know exactly what I'm trying to do, but I don't know. Sorry about that. I don't know that I can pull it off.
Right.
Right. But so you need to hit committed putts and committed tee balls. But to say, well, I wasn't 100% confident. Well, I mean, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be able to compete.
You got to trust your routine. And we get into, that whole discussion.
Absolutely.
So,
well, that was one of the things that thinking about the Masters as a whole, the actual competition, Brandon and I had a little discussion after that tournament where you looked at Matsuyama and you looked at Zalatoris and you looked at Schauffele, and there was a time where it was around 15 or 16, I believe it was, and Schauffele and Matsuyama were playing in that group together, where Schauffele looked like he could have put a little extra pressure on him, maybe a shot here. If he makes the one putt, I want to say it was on 15 or 16, it would have been a eagle there, which would have brought him within like 3. But because you could kind of see where Matsuyama was just playing that, not safe, but I mean, he was just like, right. Hey, I got the lead here. Let's get it in there. And it's always interesting to see how the player is going to respond to, okay, now let's put the pressure on him. And talk about pressure. And he even said this in his interviews. He had a whole country that was on his back, right? I mean, that's a lot. Sure. And we talked about this in the show with you, that's a dangerous spot to be in as a player. Start thinking about all of those people who are relying on you to be successful.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say there was probably as much pressure on Matsuyama as anybody I can imagine in the last, 15, 20 years.
Right.
I mean, just in terms of it not having been done. Everybody knows he's a great player. And then to have the lead. I mean, it's one thing if you start Sunday and you're 4 or 5 back.
Right.
But.
Well, yeah. We even talked about it, right, Mo, where managing success can be as difficult as managing that failure. And when he goes in the water on, was that 15 or 16? There at the end. And he's got to make a decision the way he's coming back up. That was a massive pressure shot.
Over the green in the water. He hit it over the green on 15 in the water.
15 into the water. He's up by 4, but it Schauffele had just birdied.
Yep.
And then Schauffele, after Matsuyama makes that shot, if I remember right, then Schauffele he fell back another stroke or two. He kind of imploded a little bit.
He did.
But at that time, standing over that shot, I mean, that was a massively difficult shot from a pressure perspective.
Well, and because you've just hit a good shot and you got a poor result from it. That's right. That's right. Yep. Not low and it kind of skid across in the back, but you had a pretty good shot. You get a bad result. To be able to kind of compose yourself, and that shot back to the green on 15 is really difficult. Yeah. I mean, it is slimy.
Yeah.
And to be able to pull that off and get it up there where it can just kind of make bogey, minimize the damage, that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, it was really interesting to see because I the one thing that he did, and you just brought up something I think is really important for our listeners to hear is sometimes you're going to hit a good shot and get a bad result. Sometimes you're going to execute your everything that you can control to its perfect, as close to perfection as you want. And the result's just not going to be there. And that part of the mental game is what I think for golfers, for baseball players, for a lot of different sports, it's really important to have to remember that. Yeah.
Well, and we can get into this in another way. I wish I could diagram it out for the viewers, but if you do a grid and you have, I don't know the X and the Y axis, I've forgotten that from school, but if you have execution on one and result on the other, there's basically 4 options. You're going to either hit a good shot that gets a good result. Mm-hmm. You're going to hit a good shot that gets a bad result. You're going to hit a bad shot that feels bad, you get a good result, or you're going to hit a bad shot to get a bad result. Mm-hmm. Well, pretty much good, and bad are kind of universal in terms of how most people react. Those other 2 boxes, though, are huge because if you can get yourself into the mental space where if I execute a good shot, but it turns out bad, most people look at that negative. And if you hit a bad shot, but it turns out good, so you hit it thin, or you pull the putt, but it still went in, especially as players get better and better, that still will be a negative. Mm-hmm. So now you've boxed yourself into a corner where only good is going to make me happy. Wow. I got a 25% chance of being happy, and I got a 75% chance of being upset. Well, that's a terrible way to think in golf because you're not going to be much fun to play with, and now you're basically saying only good is going to make me happy. Where if you can flip those 2, where, hey, I made a mistake, but I got away with it and it hit a tree and it's out in the fairway, or I did what I was supposed to do, but you can't judge the wind all the time. I hit a 9-iron and it came up short, but I executed it well. Now, bad is the only negative. You got a 75% chance of enjoying your day and being happy, and you're a lot more fun to play with. And so it's just a completely different way of kind of looking at it. And I really, I show that to all the college kids I work with is if you're this guy, like you're so miserable on the golf course. Yeah. And if you're this guy, it's like, hell, it's pretty easy to relax. And I'm out here and this is the only scenario that's going to get me upset, but you got to get yourself in that frame of mind before you go out there. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good.
It's great. And what we talk about all the time is don't focus on the result, focus on the process. And that's exactly what that is. So, hey, I've executed or I got away with one. There's nothing wrong with that.
And broken down that way, I almost see that grid being applied to so many other things. I know it can definitely be applied to baseball, but it's all could be applied to so many different sports, and even some work stuff is, it comes down to, are you going to, it's the half full, half empty kind of person, right? Are you going to look at everything in a negative way, which is a nice segue. So let's get into some of these off the course things. And then if we have some time, we'll definitely talk a little bit more about some of the stories of some of the tournaments that have happened here recently. But we talk about that off the course, and I was saying that, for you kind of break it down in 4 major components of off the course. You want to talk about some of those?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the big picture is everything in golf can be broken down into on course, practice and prep, or off course. And basically what you're trying to do in off course is you're trying to minimize the effect anything off the course has on the other 2, except for your mental preparation, which happens off the course. So you're trying to get the good or the benefit out of your mental preparation. And then you're trying to some degree, minimize the negative. And so, under off course, I kind of label it as 4 different areas. The A would be what we call managing the negative. And for everybody, there's at least 4 consistent parts in managing the negative. I'll just go through them real quick and then we kind of come back. But sleep, hydration, kind of managing your work, if your work is school or whatever it is, just kind of, managing that. And And then I'm drawing a blank on the fourth one. I know I put it in outline.
The self-talk.
Negative self-talk or group talk, and then take care of your crap.
Yeah. Negative self-talk or group talk. And that's huge for kind of the high school and college level because it's just kind of, in some scenarios, if you're not careful, it's just kind of cool to sit around and talk negatively about how bad you played or how awful I was. And, that just doesn't help you. But one of the just most basic things is for kids, having them understand, or it could be somebody who understands this, but they kind of forget it, is a lot of, mid-amateurs who are trying to play in the club championship or you're trying to play in the member guest. Well, if you're out entertaining on Monday and Tuesday night and you're trying to cram all this work in and you're not getting good sleep in, the problem is it doesn't show up on Friday in the first round and you got a lot of adrenaline going, you're still good. And then Saturday, you're fine. But you went out Friday night for the social aspect of it. And then Sunday you show up on the range and you literally have no legs and you're like, I'm in trouble. Mm-hmm. And just, you've done a poor job. You can't, maybe when you're 25 and younger, you can kind of recover, the 2 to 3 days. But when you're 35, 40 years and older and you're playing in club championships and member guests, you got to be getting prepared, 7 to 10 days prior in terms of your off course managing.
Right.
Yourself.
It's what makes what John Daly did there for a stretch pretty incredible, right?
Oh yeah.
The other thing, and I want you to unpack this a little bit because this has always amazed me as a coach, is how often, and you hit on it, you said, that negative self-talk, it almost becomes a cool thing. I think it's also, Mo, a defense mechanism sometimes. It's almost like people feel like, well, if I'm the first person to say stuff about my game or to talk negatively about myself, then that's going to lessen the effect or impact somebody else saying it about me will have.
Right. And there's a time for honest, brutal self-evaluation for sure. And that's not what I'm really getting at. What I'm getting at is when you're sitting around and you're a member of a team and there's, 6 to 12 people and it just becomes this session where you talk bad about your putting and you talk bad about how you're hitting it. And I tell all the college kids, I say, look, if by some chance you were playing in the Pro-Am on Wednesday and then I invited you in and we went and we ate lunch and we sat down with 3 or 4 tour players and you're talking about how negative your game is. I said, they're not going to get up and leave. They're not going to be rude, but like the next day, nobody's going to sit with us. Right, they don't do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Sit around and talk negative. And I mean, it's just kind of an, unwritten rule that, it doesn't matter how poor you played. If you go in and you eat lunch and other guys are still getting ready to play unless it's maybe, 1 or 2 of your closest friends and you're actually confiding in them and trying to get help in an honest way, but people just don't put up with that.
No,
it's
professional.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, I just try to stress to kids, like, I know you think it's cool, but it's really not. It's really just immature.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's interesting too,
what we're trying to get to,
when you hear professionals in their press conferences, they're always talking about, well, I hit a really good shot on 16, or hey,
right.
They've always, almost more than any other sport, they're always talking about the positive shot. I scrambled, I kind of sprayed it off the green or off the tee, and then I was able to really recover, and I made a great shot to get back in the hole. And it's interesting that you bring that up because you hear it's that next level mentality versus those younger high school kids.
Yep.
And I do think they like to beat each other up. I do think that, John, to your point, it's almost like, well, I didn't fail if I can poke fun at it. I didn't really put myself out there, so it really doesn't hurt if I can poke fun at it. And it's
right.
Yeah, it's an interesting mindset.
Well, I think to Brandon's point there about I always think about these press conferences. those guys, Mo, that you're dealing with on a routine basis on the tour, a lot of those guys that are at that next level of mental skill, the press are always the ones they're like bringing up. They want to talk about the bad shot, right? They want to talk about the why you lost the tournament or whatever. And it's really interesting. The finely tuned guys, especially, you can see them, to what Brandon's saying, is they're always going back to the positive. And I think it at times probably drives the press guys crazy, because they're like, no, I want to know about you hitting it in the water. And they're like, yeah, well, okay, and they almost like skip past that.
I'm not falling for that trap, right? It ain't happening.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then, this, like you said, I mean, that's just a difference and just understanding, maybe it's almost like self-protection that they know, because they know scar tissue is real. And hey, I'm not going to, you might want to talk about it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, that's a big one. And then the other one is like just managing your stuff, just so that you're not falling behind. Most one of the questions I ask almost every kid that I get in front of, I'm like, hey, what kind of grades you make? And they're like, and it's usually like, why do you care about my grades? I thought we were going to talk about golf. And so they say, I make A's, or I make A's and B's, or, I'm a good student. I say, well, do you think you're a genius? No, I don't think okay. So how do you keep yourself organized? Well, are you a calendar person, or are you a to-do list person? One or the other. How do you do that? Okay. And then I say, well, so when you go to the golf course, do you use that skill, or do you just go up to the range and just kind of start making it up as you go? Or do you just do whatever your buddies want to do? So we got to take that skill. How to organize yourself. How to, kind of prioritize, but we got to take that skill and apply it to your golf game. And even if it's literally just sitting in your car for 5 minutes before you get out and figuring out, okay, I got 2 hours. Here's what I'm going to get done in this 2 hours. I'm going to spend 40 minutes on my putting. Then I'm going to go work on my short game, for the next 30 minutes. So now I'm at an hour and 10. Then I'm going to spend 20 minutes on my wedges and whatever it is. Just making sure, because then at least we had a plan that at the end of the 2 hours, we can evaluate, did we get it done? How much did we get done? Versus just, I'm just going to go hit some balls today.
Yeah.
I tell them that's like, there's not many CEOs just walking in and saying, well, I'll just wait till the phone rings. It's not going to make you a very profitable company, I don't think. So, but just, so a lot of it is doing that. And the one thing that I would really tell listeners out there, especially if you have someone who's a good athlete and they're younger, that sort of thing, is really trying to get someone, probably not their parent, because, as we know, it gets hard for kids to listen to their parents from 13 to 20, but maybe getting some other people in their lives so that they can speak truth to them and they can kind of, jive around with them and have some fun. Because I've seen a couple, like what I would call phenoms, when they're in the 8th grade, and they should be better by the time they're in the 12th grade. Okay. Cause they're going to get bigger. They're going to get stronger. They're going to get faster. And there's only 3 reasons that's not going to happen. But one of them is they have a significant injury. So hopefully that doesn't happen. 2 is they get burnt out 95% of the time. That's because of their dad. Or the 3rd is they just don't know how to manage high school, because they're going to get into girls or guys. They're going to get into driving. They're going to get into other aspects of social life. And so, and we've all had them. We had guys that we, played sports with that were great, 8th or 9th grade. And in the 12th grade, they weren't that good. It's because they didn't know how to manage high school. And they did a very poor job of kind of managing this off the course issue. And it started affecting their on course game. I mean, without mentioning, one of these kids, he literally qualified for the USAM the summer after his 7th grade.
Wow.
So summer after 7th grade, he qualifies for the USAM, and then go on a few years, still a good golfer, getting into other things, but now he's at a major Division I college and he can't crack the lineup. And it's because he did a poor job of basically how he managed high school.
Yeah.
And so I say that for 2 reasons. One is just to help make sure parents understand, get somebody else, because you don't want to be the one nagging them and all that the whole time. And then 2 is making sure that one little blip is, they can mess this up too, because if they get burnt out, it's not the kid's fault.
Right.
If they get burnt out, it's the parents' fault because they did a poor job of keeping it fun and they lost perspective,
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's the first component. And then the second component is final preparation.
So this falls under off course. And some of these we're kind of splitting hairs, putting them wherever we want to. But positive mental prep, the easiest example I could give, I think that most of the listeners would get, if you were in the locker room before a basketball game, I don't think there's ever been a coach who wrote on the whiteboard, win the game, win the game, win the game. I mean, that's not what they put up. They put up there, hey, we got to get back on defense. We got to crash the boards. We got to know where number 5 is. There's 3 or 4 keys. And if we do these keys well, we got a chance to play well.
Yep.
Right. And then when the game's going on, they're not yelling out, hey, John and Brandon, you got to score more.
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying pass the ball around, or they're saying get back on deep. They're talking about the keys that we had listed before. Right. And so it's the same thing in golf, but in golf, for whatever reason, which is actually good for me, maybe why I get a job. But, people, they get up and they forget about the controllables. And so if I'm standing on the first tee at a college event or definitely a high school event, and you get your scorecard and they said, hey, this guy wants to ask you a question. And the only question I asked was, hey, what do you want to do today? And that's just the way I phrased it. What do you want to do today? 95% of the answers I get are going to be, I want to shoot a low score. I want to break par. I want to get off to a good start. Right? I didn't ask what results they wanted to achieve, but your mind just kind of immediately goes to the results. And you got to learn how to get your mind off the result. None of those are negative things. Those are all positive things, but you got to learn how to get your mind off the desired result and get it onto the controllable action. And so just like the coach did in the basketball scenario, if you ask that, question on the first tee at Kiowa, the guy and they might know they want to play well, but the guy whose head's in the right place, they're going to say, I'm going to be really committed to my lines today. I'm not going to get upset, especially when I hit, a good bad, because I know I'm going to misjudge the win some. And then I'm going to have a really good job of acceptance. Yeah. And then another guy's going to say, I'm going to have great tempo all day. I can't get going fast. I'm going to choose to hit confident putts. It's going to be windy out here. It's hard putting in the wind, but I'm not going to miss the putt before I even hit it. I'm going to choose to make confident strokes. And they're going to give you way more things that are controllable actions. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of positive mental prep. You want to come up with your 2 or 3 or 4 things. You want to literally have them written down, just like the coach would write them on the board. You want to write them either if you use a yardage book in your yardage book, but assuming a lot of the listeners don't, just write them on the top of your scorecard, write the first initial of them on the inside of your glove, whatever they are, so that you can have a visual reminder of this is what I'm going to get back to. These are the controllables I can keep bringing myself back to. Jonathan Bird, when we first started working back in 2006, for a while he wrote SEA on his glove, and each one had like a dot after it. So the S stood for smile. Just smile. Whether you're making a birdie or whether you're making a double, just smile, right? E stood for engage, which means don't go through your routine kind of half-heartedly. Really be engaged mentally and make sure your focus is where you want it. And then A was for the accept, meaning you're going to hit some shots and they're not going to go where you want. So smile and engage and accept, and smile and engage and accept. And just you're trying to do that all day. And because especially once you get players that are good players, that are legitimate, single digit, we already know what they're going to shoot for the rest of their life.
Yep.
Right? And I can't remember if we talked about it, but they're going to make 95% of the I ask a lot of kids, I say, hey, would you like to know what you're going to shoot for the rest of your life? And they're like, yeah, obviously. And I'm like, okay, well, here it is. 95% of the holes you play for the rest of your life, you're going to make between a 2 and a 6. You're just not going to make many 1s, and you're not going to make many 7s or worse. And 85 of that 95, you're going to make a 3 or a 4 or 5. Like if we look at all your scorecards, you have tons of 3s and tons of 4s and tons of 5s. And the reality is, if you make more 3s, you'll be closer to the 60s. If you make more fives, you're going to be closer to the 80s. But that's basically how. But as golfers, we don't do that. So if we had 3 par 4s, and so I'm going to say Brandon's playing. So Brandon starts off and he's got 3 par 4s. And he starts off 3-4-3. He's thinking, man, I'm off to – this could be a career low round with this kind of start.
It definitely would be.
My teacher really knows what they're talking about. That lesson was great. That time with Mo was really good. I mean, my wife is so good looking today. I mean, you're just like on cloud 9, right? And then you start off 5-4-5, and you're like, I'm not sure my teacher knows what they're talking about. That time with Mo was not helpful at all. And oh my gosh, my wife is just nagging the mess out of me. You're like in 2 completely different places. But the reality is, you could be 2 over through 3 and still play great. You could be 2 under through 3 and still play poor.
Yeah.
So you got to have this mindset that, okay, I'm going to play this hole. I'm going to make a 3-4-5. I'm going to go to the next hole. Play this hole. Nick Watney used to literally, like Jay Bird, he would write on the inside of his glove 3-4-5 and then an S. Okay. And what do you think the S stood for?
So what?
I'll close. It stood for shut up.
Yeah.
Make your 3-4-5, shut up, and go to the next hole.
Yeah.
Like nobody needs to hear, I can't believe I missed that putt or I get so unlucky. Just make your 3-4-5, shut up, and go to the next hole.
Yep.
Right? But having that mentality, and that was just his way of saying, hey, play a hole, be done with it, play the next hole.
I love it.
And,
I love it. It's really good.
You got to have these things written down, and then you got to have some time. You got to find your own locker room. Just like basketball players, football players, anybody in the, you got to have your locker room where you can kind of get your edge. And so I have some guys who, hey, I'm going to take a shower every time before I play, whether I tee off at 7:00 in the morning or at noon, I'm going to take a shower. So while I'm in the shower, I'm just kind of visualizing, talking to myself about having good tempo or being accepting. Other guys will just literally sit in their car before they get out of the car, at the course, and just kind of remind them. And this, does it have a huge effect from one day to another? Probably not, right? To be very honest, right? But if you get in the habit of every day getting your mind ready and knowing what you want to focus on and making that a discipline that you're going to do, then over time, you go out to the golf course, with much more control over your thoughts and where you're going to keep yourself throughout the round, regardless of how the 3s, 4s, and 5s kind of fall out. Versus if you don't go out there, then you're just subject to, being emotional. And
right.
So that's a huge part of, and I ask my guys every time, like it will, when it's Wednesday, I guess Wednesday of next week. Yeah. Not 2 days from, Wednesday of the PGA. I'm going to be on the range and I'm going to ask Keegan and I'm going to ask Zach and I'm going to ask Tom Lou. I'm going to say, hey, is your book ready? And what that means is, do you have notes in your yardage book about what you need to be doing mentally? Because I want them to write down on every page something about commitment or acceptance or breathing or walking slow or being done with that hole or nothing's going to get them upset or only bad can upset me. Like those, because I want them, every time they turn their page in their yardage book, I want it to be where they have the math and they have some mental reminder of where they need to be. I don't want them to have to go look for good thinking. I want it to be where they can't get away from good thinking. Like it's already in my book. It's already there all the time. That's why, if you look at companies and you look at business, that's why culture is so big, and having, all that in there is just a reminder of, hey, this is who we are. This is how we're going to operate. This is how we treat people. That if it's just kind of a one and done thing, it's like coming up with a great thought on the first tee. It's not going to last when the adversity comes, because the adversity is coming.
Yeah.
So
I love the idea of having your own personal locker room or like whatever, find your locker room, because that's something I would imagine as a golfer. There's times in that round, you almost have to take that pause. You have to create your own halftime. You almost have to, whether that's on the tee box as you're waiting for that group in the middle of the fairway or whatever, is just go find your space to get back into that mental locker room, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'll tell you one of the best stories I ever heard on this. I can't take credit for it, but Stewart Cink, we were working back in 2009, and And he knew, and this was, and maybe I should have saved this story for the British Open, but he's in the playoff with Tom Watson, okay? And he knows what's going down. He finished before Tom Watson. Tom Watson's in the last group. They finished. They're going to be in a playoff. So he knows, okay, hey, I want to set myself up as good as I can. I'm not going to the tee first and hear Tom Watson come to the tee and everybody be cheering for him. So on the way out to the playoff hole, he told the driver, hey, I need to go to the restroom. I need you to literally pull over to this outhouse out in the middle of Turnberry. And the guy's like, we're going to a playoff. And Stewart's like, well, they're not going to start without me. So we're going to the restroom. So he let Tom go on ahead because they started off together at the same time. He goes to the restroom. He lets Tom go on ahead. He doesn't do anything. He just literally hangs out in the bathroom at Turnberry, getting himself mentally ready, going over his keys, lets the crowd kind of die down. He doesn't have to listen to the roars for Tom Watson. And then when he drives up, he gets a nice, normal applause, and they start the playoff. But that was a great instance.
It's awesome.
Really good thinking of kind of, hey, I'm going to set myself up so that I give myself the best mental preparation for what I'm getting ready to get into.
He had a great win too the week after the Masters, didn't he?
Who are we talking about?
Stewart.
Oh, yeah. Didn't
he win at Harbour Town?
Yeah. He won at Hilton Head.
Nice.
And he's been playing phenomenal golf. But that was back in 2009. That's
hilarious. That's such a great story. And to be forward thinking enough to say this is going, I know what that reaction is going to be like, to think about that's incredible.
Stewart's a great storyteller. I've heard him tell it. He's like, hey, I know everybody wanted Tom Watson to win. My dad, I think, wanted Tom Watson to win.
Well, it goes. So I know the next bullet is perspective, but that takes a lot of honesty to be like, okay, I really don't want to hear that. I personally don't need that going into the playoff. That's a big deal on a personal level to have that acceptance.
Yeah. And we all like to be liked, and he knew that Tom's cheer was going to be louder than his cheer. So, but it was really good, just kind of forward thinking, a lot of self-awareness, and Stewart's like that though. Stewart he's a very articulate guy. He can really think, and kind of understand what's going on and assess situations. And he's definitely one of the, when I say this, he's one of the two most professional people I've ever worked with in terms of just how he thinks, how he goes about it, how he responds, both from a self-evaluation to that self-awareness to, if he and I decide we're going to go to dinner, he could shoot 81. We're going to go to dinner and he's going to be in a good mood.
Wow. That's incredible.
He's great like that.
Yeah. So, that's incredible. So Brandon brought up perspective. That's the third one there. And like you said earlier, there's no necessary rhyme or reason for that, but the key is perspective is important. Yeah.
And understand that, most of the time the people that I'm dealing with, they're trying to get to the next level, whether it's high school to college or whether it's college to the pros or whether it's they're already on tour and they're trying to get their world ranking. And like a lot of people, it's something that they're doing all the time. It consumes the majority of their hours. It is basically their job, whether it's labeled as a job or not. And so, but you got to be careful. And I always ask them, I say, hey, where would you say golf ranks in your life? And I think they're thinking I want them to say number one, but I really know if golf is number one, then they're going to struggle, because the problem is if golf is number one in your life, then pretty much by default, you're going to live and die with every shot. And it just becomes so emotional. And I have some young guys right now that are battling that have had a lot of success in college. They're either out on the Corn Ferry or they're out on tour, and they're no longer kind of have that protection and maybe the higher place, if you will, within a team. And they're out on their own. They're doing their own thing. They're traveling alone. It's a lonely place. They're getting beat up. And I want to make sure that, their perspective is, hey, just like if you might be the CEO of a top 100 company in the, still those guys, it can't be the number one thing. It's not more important than your family. It's not more important than maybe your extended family, faith, education, even for kids at school. Like, hey, you might want golf to be more important, but the sheer reality is if you're not eligible, you're not playing.
Right.
Right.
And so I think just making sure, hey, you got to be grounded somewhere outside of this game, because if your ground is in the fact that you shoot 68 or 78, you're in trouble, because that's going to happen a lot.
Well, just like you just said, you go to dinner with Stewart Cink, 81. He doesn't care. Y'all are going to have a good dinner because there's perspective there.
It doesn't define him.
No, it doesn't define him. And then to some, and every now and then I'll have this happen. But if golf is truly, 7th or 8th, then we may need to just call it a hobby, right?
Yeah.
Or we may need to say, hey, it's not that important. And I'm not making a value judgment on that at all.
Right.
Because I knew when I was in high school, like, it was not that important to me. I had a golf scholarship to go to a small school, but I knew I kind of already wanted to do that from the, story earlier when I saw the guy when I was 17 eating popcorn. And so, there's not a value judgment on that. Like, I was either going to go play golf at a Division I or I wasn't going to make it. And I went to Clemson and tried out, and I wasn't good enough. And I was completely fine with that. So I try to tell kids all the time, the one thing I want you to do, I want you to be honest with your parents, because they're spending a lot of money and they're taking you to tournaments and they're investing all that. If you don't love it, then say you don't love it, and let's go find something you do love, and let's have fun at that.
Absolutely.
And I have 2 boys. I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys. One loves it and played in college, and now he's just turned pro and trying to make it. And he's got a long road ahead. And then I got another one, and he could have played somewhere small, but he basically came to the point of like, I don't love this enough. And and it was the best decision he could make, because now he's having a great time as a freshman in college and, getting into other things. And I was so happy that he did not play college golf, because he would have been miserable.
Yeah. And it's such a relief for those players, those kids, to make that decision, because for a while they've been driven by, you mentioned earlier about, burnout and fathers and that impact that they have is, a lot of times that parent is the motor for that child, and, is the only reason they're out there practicing for 2 or 3 hours a day or whatever. It's not for a love of the game. It's because dad's going to be in a, bad mood all night if I don't go out there and
100%. One of the saddest conversations I think I've ever had, or just kind of like, just made me sick. I had this girl, this fun girl. She's 17 years old. She's sitting in my office, and we're talking, and we're talking about the things I want her to play the hole that she's on, the 3, 4, 5, and we're getting into that. And I said, but hey, you can play other things. I said, Nick Watney's told me before, man, I'm playing like 6 other things other than the hole I'm on. I'm playing the leaderboard, or I'm playing the guys in my group, or I'm playing what I shot 2 days ago, or I'm playing, against the expectations, because I know everybody's checking this online. Like, I'm playing so many other things. And she just got kind of quiet. And I said, something wrong? And she said, I know what I'm playing. And I said, what's that? She said, I am always playing the phone call after the round with my dad.
Wow.
And you do not want to be that parent. So listeners, you need to make sure that for you to have the perspective that when you talk to your kids, like, that's not the first thing you should be talking about. You should be talking about, hey, did they have fun? And if you go on a trip, and, the golf should be a part of that, but it's a family vacation, and we're going to go on this, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to do other things. And, if they're calling you from college, every phone call can't be about the qualifier, and every phone call can't be about, are you in the starting lineup? And that's just, that's
it's
where
so
your
tough.
Perspective is out of whack.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of parents that go through it. I was guilty of it myself in the very beginning when my son played college football, is, because you're interested in that.
100%.
But you do have to always be mindful that that's the way that comes across, because back to that perspective, it's now all of a sudden their perspective as the student athlete, as the child is, oh, the only way that dad's going to be happy is if I'm doing these things or whatever. And that's a tall burden on them. So,
and that's just, I think, I tell, and most kids know, I mean, hey, most parents have very good intentions. It's just a lot of times we screw that up and go about it the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And myself included, like I said, but you gotta kind of like, okay, hey, especially after a round, one of the pieces of advice I'd give to parents is, it doesn't matter how good your advice is. If they're not listening, they're not going to hear it.
Right.
Amen.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to hear it. So you might as well wait. And when they're ready to talk about it, then talk about it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's great advice. So the other one there of those major components is a persona. Yeah.
And so, and a lot of times I'm asked, perspective is how you view things and specifically how you view your golf. And then persona is how do people view you? And specifically, how do people view you, in your golf? And the way I would want my players to kind of handle themselves is kind of this small phrase I came up with called casual and confident. And casual just means I don't need to be so formal. Everything doesn't have to be so uptight. Just be casual, and then confident means I know what I'm doing, even if I don't know what I'm doing. And so, I'll have a kid here in the next month, and we can talk when he's going to qualify for the U.S. Open, and he's maybe a freshman in college, and I'm going to be talking to him about, hey, when you walk onto the putting green at Torrey Pines, right, you have every right to be on that putting green as John Rahm and Rory McIlroy. And you've qualified, you've earned your way. Nobody gave it to you. And so you need to walk on that putting green confident and go through your drills and do what you're doing. And, also, hey, if you happen to shoot a poor score and we go to that scores, you're walking up to the scores table, you're going to walk in there casual. You're going to hold your head high. You're going to walk in there confident and you're going to sign for a 79 that you're really, really upset with. And we're going to act professional and here's how we're going to go about it.
Yeah.
But just getting them to understand like, okay, hey, yeah, I think I can kind of make that, I'm going to be casual and I'm going to be confident. I'm going to be casual and I'm going to be confident. How I walk, how I go through the parking lot, how I show up on the range, how I go to the scorer's tent, how I interact with the sponsors and the volunteers, all that is, at least,
And it's the old thing, act different than you feel, and eventually you'll feel as you're acting, right? It's the fake it till you make it, however you want to frame it. It's really you choosing, and you mentioned this earlier, is one of the keys to one of the players was I choose to have confident putts today. Is that's such a big deal, is when you make that choice, I'm going to be confident. I'm going to walk with big body language. I'm going to have that, because you can convince yourself, you can act your way into confidence. It's an amazing thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But so, if we're kind of just summarizing this, and I'm trying to, because all of this goes back to a player walks off the course, they've just shot, a great score or a poor score. I want them to be able to understand, okay, what went into that? What really helped to, in terms of, and for off the course, we got to be able to evaluate your sleep. We got to be able to evaluate your hydration. We got to be able to evaluate, how you are in terms of managing your stuff. It could be just that you did a terrible job of, getting yourself ready in terms of, I did a very poor job of managing my sleep because I stayed up with my buddies. I'm used to have this, ongoing discussion with my son when he was 16 years old and he'd play poor in the tournament. And, the next day or so he'd say, man, I can't believe I played that poor. And I would say, well, I was pretty poor and normally play better, but what do you think caused it? Well, I think I hit too many of these. And I said, well, that could be. I think you think staying up till like 2 or 2:30 playing video games had anything to do with it? No, Dad, it had nothing to do with it.
Of course not.
Right, well, it's just something to think about. I could be wrong. It's just something to think about. But you teed off at 8:30 and you went to bed at 2:30. So I don't know. I don't see any of my guys doing that.
Right.
But
yeah, that's
the
right.
first one that's going to do this.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I think that's a key is, managing those things. And then, like you say, is that positive mental preparation, and then having the right perspective and having the right persona as well.
And one thing that I would just add is, as I say that little funny story is, with families, helping your perspective, helping your kids learn how to manage all this, you're going to get a lot more of them to think about it if you're asking them questions.
Absolutely.
So ask them, hey, do you think this might have had a chance? Hey, I'm not sure. So don't tell them what you think went wrong. Don't tell them where they messed up. Just ask them questions, and they will do the reflection, and they'll start to figure it out on their own. Because if you start telling them how bad they did and what they did wrong, they're just going to block you out.
Yep.
Okay? But if you ask them questions as if you're inquisitive about, well, maybe this is what caused it, you'll get them to do the thinking, because that's ultimately what we want, is we want them to be able to evaluate and figure things out on their own, right? So that they're truly are growing in their understanding of their own game.
Such a key thing, Mo. And we Brandon and I just have been talking about this. Has been kind of the drum we've been pounding recently, is that parents are that first mental skills coach, that first mental, whatever performance coach that a kid has is, and that's the key area you just talked about. It's that self-assessment, is guiding them in through that process of how they can debrief their day as a student athlete, as a young player, how they can just give that honest assessment of themselves. And you hit it on the head, is ask more. A friend of ours wrote a book, Ask More, Talk Less, Listen Better. And I think that's a good one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know go ahead.
No. Yeah, you go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say, I know we want to be respectful of your time. I think going into this upcoming week at Kiowa, I think we would be remiss if we didn't ask, especially we're going to go back to something that you had talked about before. That course that your professionals are going to be playing require a whole lot of commitment, depending upon the weather and all the other uncontrollables, right? So how do they manage that in this upcoming week?
Well, I hopefully I said this the first time, maybe I didn't, but one of the things for sure is there's going to be more media, there's going to be more kind of hype and excitement, but every time we go to a major, what I'm really trying to get them to understand is, okay, what do we need to physically be ready for? What are the physical demands of this golf course? The physical demands of Kiowa are going to be extremely different than the physical demands at Augusta, just because of the nature of it and the size of the course and, being exposed and all those sorts of things, different time of the year. But so that would be one of the first things is, hey, I know this is, quote, the second major of the year, but it doesn't really matter what they call it. How do we need to get ready for Kiowa? And I think, what I would say, the difficult aspects of Kiowa are going to be putting in a lot of wind. That's always difficult, and it's so easy to just kind of lose your nerve or lose your confidence over short putts. And then, then you do what we talked about. Then you start missing them before you even, take a stroke. But you're not trusting your routine. That's going to be a huge part of Kiowa. It's going to be, if it gets, assuming it's windy, you're going to have the short game shots. I don't know exactly what's going to be required, but you're going to have the short game shots to just get the ball up and down a lot, because you're going to miss a lot of greens. This is not a place where you're going to see people hit a ton of greens, because if it gets windy, even the best ball strikers just can't get it right all the time, especially if there's a lot of crosswinds, because it's so hard to gauge. Is that, we know it's from right to left, but is it right to left and helping or right to left and hurting? And it gets hard to figure out. And then another one that I think is going to be really difficult most of the time, especially at Augusta per se, right? So the difference at Augusta and Kiowa is Augusta, you know where the trouble is. It's to the right or to the left with the trees or the bunkers. And so you're picking something in the middle and you're trying to hit it there, and there's not really that much wind that it would affect it. And so your visual is pretty much within the parameter of play, and you're trying to exclude or not look at the things to the outside. In Kiowa, you're going to be forced to look at the outside because the wind is so strong. You're going to now need to play it in the sand dunes and trust that the wind's going to bring it back. Or you're going to need to look, over here in the marsh and like, am I truly going to start this ball out in the marsh? And if it doesn't cover, I'm re-teeing. I mean, that's going to be hard to do. So, a huge key that's not as everybody had to do it at Augusta, but it's a much simpler task is picking your lines, and kind of all the caddies and the pros know this is where we want to hit it. This is where we want to hit it, especially since, let's just say, quote unquote, the top 30 in the world, they've been there several years in a row. Well, now at Kiowa, we hadn't been there in a while. We don't go there very often. And so the communication and the commitment level Tuesday and Wednesday, picking lines between player and caddy is going to be real important. Like that component of the preparation is significantly different than that component of the preparation at Augusta.
Yeah, right.
And just understanding, okay, hey, that's what we're going to need to be good at, that sort of thing. Understanding how to practice at Kiowa is going to be important because guys are going to practice. But at Augusta, they have great turf. It's not that windy, like I said, and so you can do that. If we get to Kiowa and it's really blowing hard left to right on the range, right? If you're not careful, then that can start affecting your swing and, really understand how you go about it. So you got to be careful in terms of managing how you go about it, what you're used to. And if and I don't work with Will Zalatoris, I don't really know him at all. And obviously he's played good at Wingfoot. He's played good at Augusta. I'll be very curious to see how he plays just because this is going to be different than those two. I mean, Wingfoot was really brutal in terms of the rough and that sort of thing. But Kiowa is going to be his first major in significant wind where your visuals are different than his other two. So just, as a fan of golf, literally as a fan of golf, that will be one of the things I'm watching is to see how he handles a different venue and a different set of physical demands than what he had really in his first two majors.
Well, I will tell you, one of the things I'm going to be watching is the good bads and the bad goods and how players adjust to them, because I'm going to keep that one with me. That one, because trust me, I have a lot of the bad bads, but occasionally I'll have a bad good.
I was going to say, I feel like listening to Dr. Mo, at least I now can justify when hey, I do only have the 25%. I just happen to always hit the 25%.
Yes.
So
yeah. I have 75% positivity on the 25% shots. So
that's right.
Yeah. Well, now
here's
look,
a real quick funny story. We're out of because it's a PGA story. We're out of the PGA. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma one year. I'm staying with Lucas Glover and John Rollins. We're at this house. I go out. They give me to take the trash out. I go out. I put the trash up. Well, this rental house we're at, you go into this kind of like little, fenced in area, and I'm putting and the gate locks behind me. And I'm like, they're out on the porch, and I'm like, hey, y'all got to come open the gate. And they're like, I can't hear you. I'm like, hey, come let me out, And John Rollins goes, I thought you were supposed to be positive. I said, I am. I'm positive I cannot get out. Come help me. So,
that's right. Yeah. Hey, I mean, look, there's got to be. That's one of those things I'm sure your players get a kick out of is when you're out on the course, because I don't care how dialed in we are mentally, and you teach it. I mean, these guys come to you for that. That game of golf will wear you out. I don't care where you are mentally. I'm sure there's plenty of times they've seen you get frustrated and probably have to remind you of,
oh yeah,
hey, remember what you told me?
yeah. It's,
That's
and as we all
awesome.
know, as parents, it's way harder to watch than to actually play.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to just watch.
Well, you don't have any controllable actions other than being positive, right? You have zero control.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Well, Dr. Mo, you did it again. So much good stuff. And I know we're going to get just as much positive feedback on this one. And guys, and I'll mention this again in the intro and stuff, but I mean, Dr. Mo's written, he's got 3 books, The Winning Way in Golf and Life, Learn to Win a Major, and then Learn to Win One Shot at a Time. Go pick these up. You can get them on Amazon. Elevate Performance, is that a good website they can check out as well, where they can learn, they've got customized coaching there, executive development, retreats and stuff, but so much good stuff. I mean, really, really, we're so blessed to have you for 2 shows and knowing that you're going to be coming back for 2 more. And I cannot wait to unpack the things on the course, because if this is just off the course and practice and prep, good Lord, we're gonna really have to buckle up for the on the course stuff. Well, good luck to you and the players down there in Kiowa. I know it's definitely going to be exciting, because it's always exciting at Kiowa, but we really do appreciate you taking the time again and joining us.
Appreciate it, guys. Looking forward to it. And like I said, we'll see how this one plays out. And then looking forward to Torrey and then I guess St. George's.
St. George's, yeah. Be here before you know it, because this one came up fast.
I got a couple good St. George's stories.
I can't wait. I tell you what, if the wind's blowing, they're going to feel like they're at St. George's next weekend.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
guys.
Thanks, Dr. Mo. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Dr. Mo. Safe travels.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.